Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.52. Okay, let's continue this. Hopefully we'll get a bit further this episode in terms of getting closer to the war. I've attached, and we should attach here, this is my fighter command. I don't know if there is any benefit to having a chain of command as in various benefits to reducing supply and that type of thing. There might be. Don't know if any of these traits go up, but there might be, but I don't know. So let's give him. But I've renamed this FC Wing Fighter Command and started to attach some of the newly deployed fighter types here, ready to protect Britain. France is having a lot of indecision along the border here. Oh, great. Industry has advanced. And we've maxed that out. Well, actually, let's cancel that because we can research both of those. And I want to jump on those immediately up to the top. So those two are fundamental tech, so I look at that as always make sure that they are as updated as practical, at least. I should probably also start building a few divisions. Okay, well, I'm not going to worry one way or another about nationalist China. Oh, how interesting. I gather Japan has done a naval invasion as opposed to it being pushed back. That's very, very interesting, because whenever I'm freaking playing as Germany, and I sometimes will go, give allied objectives to some places, they never seem to naval invade. And they're allied to me, they all get stacked up in here at times and bogged down forever. Because if Japan's army is put together the way it sort of should be, both in terms of history and within the general rules of Hearts of Iron, that they should be able to make divisions that will kick Chinese divisions' asses easily. But China also can stack up a lot of their mass cheap divisions and rotate them in and out of combat either into the reserve capacity or are forced to retreat, go back, retreat out, regain organization, and before the river crossing is achieved, move it back in and that kind of thing to keep that flowing, to keep the smaller Japanese army, smaller, better Japanese army, contained in this rugged country, because we can look at this up here, this fairly rugged country up here, and keep them contained there on a limited front. Now, if you can outflank that front and invade around the other places, they have to disperse their force. Now, of course, once they disperse, once you have many fronts, their greater numbers potentially can, if you drive deep in here, they can then create, cut off, create pockets. But if you're reasonably rapidly responding with some mobile forces, you can keep that from happening. So, I guess good for the Japanese AI for once doing it, but not doing it when I would want them to do it as a help to me. Yeah, I'm a bit frustrated about some things. Because if it wasn't for the messed up supply system and the arcade mode, and you can play that. I did that once long before I ever started playing Black Ice. Just didn't have the satisfying feeling, is because although the units, you produce supplies and the units consume supplies, there was never a limitation on how much could be supplied in an area. So you can have one tiny little port and supply some huge army group size unit. That sucks. So, you've looked at supply a little bit with Hearts of Iron 4. Is obviously supplies are gone, but they have a nice system to tell whether units are in supply or not, and so you can't, well, without taking penalties, obviously you get penalties, to determine if a unit is in, or how many units can be supplied in a certain area under certain conditions. So the more ports you get, the more you can supply, and things like that. So it varies. I would have liked a hybrid of manufacturing supplies and consumption of supplies like in Hearts of Iron 3, but without having to move supplies, and use sort of the system in Hearts of Iron 4 to determine if a unit is in supply, and if not, then have the various penalties and get worse and worse, stacked up. Are you just one division over the supply limit, or are you 25 divisions over the supply limit? Have a severity system like that, sort of have a hybrid between the two. I think would have worked out to be great. But no, they decided to get rid of everything. So if the supply system was fixed and the AI was fixed, Hearts of Iron 3 would have been a truly great game. As it is now, it's good. What makes this particularly good is that we're playing Black Ice that has so much other richness added to it, so it does get to the level of greatness. And yes, I'm talking about the combination of Hearts of Iron 3 and Black Ice together to get to that greatness. There we go. And I want to build interesting just to see the different early tanks. Okay, let's see. I want to build a motorized attachment there. Let's go with just regular artillery. Motorcycle reconnaissance. We'll need motorized engineers. Truck transports. And a division HQ for 38 ICs. Start production. Now, let's move those down there. Obviously it's not quite producing yet, but we're just getting it into the queue. And we're still producing a slight oversupply. Of supplies. Okay, supply production has advanced. And heavy armor designs. Not sure if when we're going to be building heavy armor, but I've definitely thought about infantry support tanks, because the British, yeah, I would say definitely had that type of model. Depends on sort of, do you want to call a Matilda a heavy tank? It definitely was in its day. And we'll also do support. Or would you want to call it an infantry support tank? And it was also that as well. Land power has happened to us. Okay, good. Which tech is this? Okay, gasoline engines. Fine. Nice. We'll look somewhere else. Rolling artillery barrages. A very World War I tactic. That does work. Excuse me. Timing is critical. You have to have confidence, one, that your artillery knows what it's doing, and that they're going to constantly adjust fire up or away from you. And you also have to have infantry willing to move towards the impacting artillery, which of course is dangerous, because if you give them the enemy time to get out from under cover, you're just going to then have, because by doing the artillery barrages, you're often warning the enemy you're attacking. A little different than the World War I tactic of days of artillery fire, hoping to soften up the enemy right there. That would have then allowed, whether they moved it into their barrage zone or not, or just behind the barrage zone, telegraphs to the enemy where you're planning the attack. But it does, so if you use it, you don't use it that way, but you just improve security units. But it does, generally speaking, let the enemy know that you're coming there. Like I say, it doesn't give them time to shift in massive reinforcements. But it's also a sort of a blanket pattern in that it's not concentrated on a specific target, it's just a general area. And the enemy, presumably, if they're at all, because to get the artillery, it's different in the modern day, but in World War II, or even more so in World War I, to get the artillery there and set up and prepared, and the idea that you're going to have the guns zeroed in on the right location and be able to walk it back, that takes a lot of preparation. So you're never able to use it effectively, at least, on a fluid battle scene. I know everyone's going to get the artillery bonus, whether it's fluid or static battles or whatever, but because you don't just show up, unlimber the guns, and be able to lay down an artillery barrage and walk it out with having the infantry coordinate. It's going to be against a defensive line, like when for the Battle of El Alamein here. Both sides at that time for that battle had a defensive lines dug in, or various sieges and counter sieges on Tobruk. Presumably most of your enemy that you're attacking, whether they be infantry or anti-tank guns or whatever, will be able to take cover in, at least minimum foxholes, so that generally the rolling artillery barrages aren't that devastating to kill too many people in their foxholes. Obviously a few will die, but they'll be fairly effective if you're not catching people out in the open. And so if they can walk past them, most of the enemy would recover and give time that, if you're not right up on them, they'll come up and then, oh, hey, we've got a lot of targets to shoot at now. All the guys out in the open that otherwise, not doing well. But if you can come right in behind it. Which one was it? I'm talking too much. Okay, now pilot. We'll go over now. Ground crew. If you're coming in right behind it, the enemy is still a bit disrupted, even if they're not wounded or killed. Disrupted from the attack. And you can be very devastating infantry attacks come right in on the heels of a rolling barrage. Don't know why we're not at 100 here, because we have the apologetic clerk and the open society, which gives minus of 10% with only that free plus 10% and all the other little benefits. We should be at 100%. National immunity, don't know. Okay, battle commander recognition. No, we'll let that one go. It reduces our attack in between. Oh. Okay. Let's see, we can send supplies like we've done before. I think that's what we're going to do. We're just going to send supplies now. Let's go take another quick look. No, we're gonna send troops. No, too much. We're just gonna send supplies. I don't want to get too bogged down in that war, or give them any sort of excuses to declare war on us early. Okay, machine gun focus advance. I believe that's this. That's good. Now, let's see. Do that. Improve. Okay. That has now opened up. I'm going to do medium armor next, I think. We are slowly, with 30 ICs, working down the upgrade situation. And mass events. And mechanical computing. Okay, well, you know, these are going to be rather useful to us, I think. Maybe critical. So we're going to go over to that. Help in our U-boat war, or our anti-U-boat war primarily, but Britain did maintain various sub-operations in this part of the world, of course, and very much so is during, and struggled to maintain at times, sub-operations out of Malta, but even when they had to withdraw subs because they couldn't, well, bombing levels were affecting the ability to even base subs in Malta, as well as fuel levels to be able to operate out, fuel and food even levels, to operate subs out of Malta was bad enough that they had withdrawn to other ports. They still kept up sub operations in the Mediterranean, and of course they were also doing some once the war opened in the east. Okay, Sigmund Freud arrives in London. By the end of May, arrangements for Freud's own departure for London had become stalled, mired in legally tenuous and financially extortionate. Not used to that word, at least. No, it's like extortion, but extortionate. I don't know. Process of negotiating with the Nazi authorities. However, the Nazis appointed commissar put in charge of his assets, and those of the IPAs approved to be sympathetic to Freud's plight. Anton Sauerwald had studied chemistry in Vienna University under Professor Herzig, old friend of Freud's, and evidently retained outstanding allegiance, respect for Freud's professionals. Standing, Freud left Vienna on the Orient Express, accompanied by their household staff and a doctor. They arrived in Paris the following day, where they stayed as guests of Princess Maria Bonaparte before traveling overnight to London, arriving in Victoria Station June 6. Okay, we will gain a tech bonus of some sort. Don't know if that's education or something, but okay, that's good. Nope. The Nazis didn't like him. Everybody's getting out of Austria. Who can? Who doesn't like the Nazis? Now, obviously, there were lots and lots of Austrians who liked the Nazis, but not all. And as it showed, Germany was, and I know I've talked about this in the last series, had a significant foreign currency problem. Sometimes people don't understand the difference between money domestically and money internationally. Domestically, Nazis really didn't have that much of a problem because they could always print more money. And you can always print more money now. Of course, if you do it irresponsibly, you get the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic. if you just sort of expand the available amounts of money based on the economic activities within your country. So if you put a lot of people to work making armaments, and you pay them, and then they'll go buy other things. Now, if all they're doing is making armaments, like in wartime, and no one's making civil goods, then you'll get inflation because people's money, there won't be things to buy with it. So what little there is to buy, it'll cost more and more. So that's why they do war bonds and rationing. That's why they were doing a bunch of rationing in the U.S. during the war, even when there wasn't needed, just because they wanted all the factories producing stuff for the war and very few for the civil side, but they were paying a lot of people a lot of money, so they needed to keep the inflation from happening, not just because there wasn't enough of it, whatever it was. So if you look at Germany with the expanding military, the expanding civil economy as well, because there was an expanding civil economy, then you can continue to print more money as you need to. So long as you do it responsibly, you can avoid inflation. But, which is why I've always sort of which I'm glad that they didn't use money here as a buy units, pay money or pay soldiers, because this is an international exchange of money. This is where Germany had its problems. Because of economic problems in other countries, because of competition coming from places like America, some of its finished goods, things like radios, weren't necessarily in high demand in other countries. So Germany didn't necessarily have a lot of things at this time that it could readily export to get foreign currency, people buying it in French francs or English pounds. But then Germany, which was very busy at this time trying to import raw materials to then use to pay for it. So it's balance of exchange. So they loved the Olympics, both the winter and particularly the summer Olympics, because it brought lots of tourists showing up at their borders going, hey, I've got American dollars, British pounds, French francs. I'm sorry, I don't know what the Polish or Czech currencies were, but I've got this money. I want to exchange it for local spending money, at least, And I love that, because most of those people were just going to spend that money there. We're going to maybe have a pittance, less than what $100 or whatever it might be at the time, wanted to excess money that they want to exchange back out of it, so that they would easily let that happen. But it was mostly foreign currency pouring into Germany that Germany then could use to balance out its trade of payments situation. So they loved that. But when Germans wanted to leave, and there was as we've seen again with Third Reich events, there were many programs that were designed for different reasons, I do believe, to have Germans visit other countries in Europe. Often, like Hitler Youth outings going to Britain, that 20, 30 Hitler Youth at a time, going on a trip to somewhere like Britain or wherever else. They loved the Germans to do that. And if you wanted small amounts of currency to tour the other parts on, you got your new Volkswagen or whatever, and you're going to drive around France. Yes, I think to a point they wanted to have people know the roads and layout of France. I do believe that there was that in their mindset. Not that every holiday couple is a German officer in civilian clothes plotting out his path of advance through France for his tanks. No, I'm not even saying that at all. I'm just saying average sort of Germans get a familiarity with other places. If they are then part of an army, they will at least have a familiarity. But they wanted Germans to go out. Also, I think it was a comparative thing. Not all the other countries were always doing so well. And so you go out and you go say, hey, Germany's doing great. You go to this sort of chaotic France. You go, hey, it was a nice holiday, but man, this isn't going so well here. Nazi Germany ain't so great, but better than this other stuff they were hoping. I think, they're getting multiple reasons. So small currency bundle amounts were quite easily to get. But if you wanted to move a large amount of money, and by a large amount of money I mean the price of a home, which, way back at this time in Britain was just, I think, like 10 pounds. I mean, because, it was the old style pounds, and pounds were worth a lot more. But, and so, prices of homes and up from that, they really, really discouraged that. You had to, if you're going to, try to move that money out of, in essence, exchange it, or even just try to transfer it to another bank, because presumably if you transferred Deutschmarks, or Reichsmarks at this time, I guess, Reichsmarks to a bank in France, presumably you're going to be exchanging it for French francs or whatever. So it was a presumption of exchange at some point, which, do too much of that, it starts lowering the value, because people only want so many Reichsmarks. It lowers the value of the Reichsmark even more. So there was a lot of currency controls at this time, particularly on Germany, for moving out money. So that was part of, and I don't know, I mean, I'm just taking from what I know and a little bit about Sigmund Freud, that presumably he was able to sell up his house and his property, his non-movable properties, and basically give up everything in Germany, because of course they were trying to get rid of the Jews and they wanted them out, but they didn't want them to, if they sold their property, as opposed to have it confiscated, sometimes at shall we say, reasonably fair prices, other times at very unfair prices. But they didn't, so if you sold that out to a German, they didn't then necessarily want you to take that money out of the country. They wanted you to leave it in a bank in Germany. So yes, Jew person, you can sell your house to a good Aryan person and then you can leave, but you can't take any of that money with you. And of course, if in the future we want to confiscate all Jewish bank accounts, we can do so. Or confiscate, as we saw with Prince Otto of the Habsburgs, who was living in France, confiscate Austrians, even non-Jewish, and I don't think Prince Otto of Habsburg, maybe because of various generations of intermarriage between elites in Europe, that he might not be full Aryan blood, whatever, because they're marrying Spanish princesses, because the Habsburgs, of course, ruled Spain for a while, or whatever it might be. He might not fit the Nazi viewpoint of complete Aryanness or complete Germanness, but then so would the Hohenzollern princes and others, quite potentially. But he wasn't necessarily of, I presume, of some of the suspect groups. This has got to be the Hitler counter there. So even if you were theoretically of the right type of peoples, but you were residing more or less permanently outside of Austria, you got your property confiscated as well after the German takeover, as opposed to being able to sell it off and exchange your money out. So there was a lot of control going on with Germany at this time. Okay, we give them crude oil for money. We have more than enough crude oil coming in. We could use a little bit more money, that'd be fine. So that is how things were working, not just with Austria, but generally with people trying to move any significant amount of capital. You want money for a week's vacation around somewhere in Europe? Sure thing, no problem. Okay, self-sealing fuel tanks, that will be useful. Basically rubber-lined gas tanks, so that if they relatively, because a bullet moving very fast with the right type of rubber won't make that actually big of a hole, so you then, pierce it but so the rubber can seal up after it passes through with little or no gasoline loss, and hopefully little or no fire started because of that gasoline. Large caliber. Mentioning the large caliber guns, a lot of nations, and particularly I'm thinking of the British, primarily mounted, at least in the interwar and early war period, were mounting 30 caliber machine guns on their aircraft. And also the Germans were roughly, I call it 30 caliber, the 7.92 or 7.62 is 30 caliber, but close enough. We're doing that with their guns. And so when you have an unarmored aircraft, the British were anticipating trying to mostly hit the pilot, the enemy pilot, and not have very good accuracy in being able to hit the pilot. So they wanted a large stream of bullets going out there to hit them. What they obviously did find, though, was the ability of their enemy to armor up their aircraft somewhat. And so what the American with its 50 caliber was able to do was to put up something that could blow a big enough hole potentially through a gas tank that a self-sealing wouldn't be able to stop it. And the Germans also went with what generally it's called a cannon. It's something, well, it gets large enough, like a 20 millimeter, you would consider it a cannon, in their aircraft that, pardon, I gotta stop. Okay, back. That was just my alarm going off. That with the cannon, you get a lot more destruction. They didn't have. It was at the very end of the war, and it was for larger shells that they started to get proximity fuse. So with the cannon, you still have to hit the aircraft, but you're carrying fewer ammunition with a slower cyclic rate. So you got to be more accurate with it. But when you hit the enemy with the cannon, it would explode. It was an explosive round, generally speaking. Yes, they did also have straight penetrator type stuff too as well, but explosive rounds hitting, and that would do a lot of damage within the aircraft and really shut it down. Because putting a couple of, just a few 30 caliber rounds through most aircraft, they're still flyable. And unless you if you have self-sealing fuel tanks, or you do hit the the enemy pilot, you're going to be able to get that aircraft home with the damages. So you need to step it up. The American 50, which I do love as a weapon, I think it's a wonderful weapon, is just in that sweet spot in that it's not as expensive and or as bulky for either the gun or the ammunition of the cannon, but will smash through most of the armor that you're putting in an aircraft, at least. And of course you can always do an armor piercing round, in which is just instead of a pure lead core in there, you can put a harder bit of metal in there as well. And so you can really do it that it's just hit with enough energy, big enough hole in it, and with enough rounds that you just really take it out. So I really love that sort of American sweet spot between the machine gun and the cannon of this day. Okay, oil refining advance, great. So we'll stop all of these 41s, which obviously that helps us, oil refining, but we didn't really need, at least at this point. Though I say that because at this point, because we very well may be facing the situation of not enough convoys or something, so we may cut off some of our, especially Far Eastern oil supply sources. And metal production improvement, that's great as well. Okay. Broadcasting advanced, that is also very good, which will get us another benefit. And infantry anti-tank weapons. This time, of course, you're talking about anti-tank rifles, as opposed to like the British Piat or the American bazooka. And African recruitment. Let's see how we're doing with African recruitment. 39. Okay, well, we're not going to push this ahead at all at this time. We like those sort of cheap, low-quality units, but they have their use. Let's open that up. Go back to pushing ahead with our fighter technologies. And we're going to recruit some African units. Mascari with a camel. It's still showing up here. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Okay. Just sort of the simple one. I would prefer to have some more of those type. These are the Queen's African rifles, but as opposed to just the regular, but more transports and artillery would be nice. Maybe that's what we should see about doing. What would it cost us to make a couple of camel trains? 32 days. Well, maybe we should wait till later. Because we definitely want to keep pushing on this. We're doing okay here. 39, 39, 39, 39. Obviously these aren't in production yet. We should move up the Ark Royal. Not sure on that one. So as you can sort of tell, I like weapons. Machine guns, rifles, artillery, but particularly things like machine guns and rifles, so I studied them a bit. Shot them a bunch. Okay, radios. Advanced, good. Now we will get radios in our airplanes. I know we think things like those are, of course you would have radios in airplanes, but it wasn't always such. And yes, boys and girls, there was a time before you could walk around with your own phone in your pocket at all times. They had what they called payphones. Uh-oh. We've lost Madrid. Bummer. I know we talked a little bit about the red box payphone earlier in the series, but for percentage of ground, the Republicans are doing okay. Not good, but okay. Moving this capital. Don't know if that's gonna allow the Republicans to win if they can run the clock out. I haven't... If I been a long time if I did or haven't really looked at the code, but my understanding of the code for the ending of the war, that if at some point by some date the Republicans, I believe, still hold Madrid and presumably a few other provinces, not like just Madrid, but a few other key provinces, they're automatically considered the winners of the war, meaning presumably that this is not going to go on forever, and somebody somewhere would have given enough effort to the Republicans to push. I know it's a bit artificial, but I think it's a reasonable thing that we don't want to see the war go on too long. Because to a point, what Hearts of Iron have done, what Black Ice have done, is to try to balance out the Spanish Civil War so that it mostly wins by Spain, but it takes a while to do it, to represent the historical situation, and not necessarily because it doesn't work well. This whole system of trying to model the different levels of units and supplies and support. Okay, let's see the plans. And let's see the plans. Okay, now. What do we want to... Well, here we are. Build next. Imperial War Ministry looks good to me. Advanced Education, that looks good to me as well. I think that's maybe what we'll do. That's normally what I do first for Germany. But I wanted to get the national unity and ruling party support. Early on. Yeah, we'll do that. I think if we survive long enough, that will help us out and survive even more. And for here, we've got small heroic tales and news and politics. I think we'll go small because, well, we'll get a lot more ruling party support there. I think that'll be more useful for news and politics, so we'll do that as well. Okay, so university and news and politics. Now I'm doing this specifically this way to make sure that, and again, this is the one that, because I copied and pasted it over a bunch of the TRE images. So this isn't the one that Black Ice normally uses. That's the period. That's a period shot of some sort of, I don't know, going to class or anniversary. I don't know, some sort of parade or whatever event in Heidelberg or the staff there. You can see some German office or German police or somebody. You can see it much clearer in the larger version of the photo from the time. So it's during the Third Reich, and that's the Heidelberg University sports badge. They put on the T-shirt type thing. Well, there's also an officer's cap right there. You can see I had to sort of frame the picture to fit there. And like you see on all the different various sports shirts, so Heidelberg University with the German eagle, the little what would be a swastika if you get in there in the picture. I've been to Heidelberg once, have some photos. I walked around that castle, took some interesting photos that day. So been there, seen it, nice little town. Okay, reason I wanted to do it because 2,000 money, and the other I think we've just good. We got that. So it's ripped a lot of money out there. So okay, and I think we're going to do the not now thing again. That jumped up because I guess they just mostly, I think that just represents they want us to spend some ICs on consumer goods. Then it really means. First I thought when I first saw the first one was, oh, university, that's going to create dissent because university students create dissent kind of thing, but I gather it's just more they want us because all the various techs or new buildings have that same level of effect. Okay, well, we're going to end the episode here. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. I do appreciate it. Please post comments. I do like discussing things with you because obviously this is a monologue, but I do sort of keep in mind all the stuff that you guys have fed back to me as to how I handle this, so it is important to me. So thanks a lot.